Hello and welcome to the Nancy Drew channel, and today's episode is entitled Top 10 Suspects. Police say new evidence gathered in the JonBenet Ramsey case. New evidence found nearly 30 years after JonBenet Ramsey. New interviews and DNA tests in JonBenet Ramsey cold case. John Ramsey doesn't know what the new evidence is. So the unknown male DNA should be identified at the beginning of this year, 2026. And I made this video of my top 10 suspects. And naturally, all of these people are innocent until proven guilty. And obviously, out of the 10, only one could really be the killer. And in this video, none of the suspects are one of the Ramseys, because none of us have ever thought for a second that John or Patsy or Burke or John Andrew committed this crime. So let the top 10 suspects, building to the most likely suspect, begin. Number 10. Randall Simmons, age 44, and he lived in Englewood, Colorado, about 45 minutes away from the Ramseys' house. And then over there on the top right, you can see a photograph of his house. And obviously that is not his car, because this is a new photograph. And then below you can see a map to show you the distance from Englewood to Boulder. Now, Randall's life has seemed to have gone downhill. And at the time of JonBenet's murder, he was doing well and doing a lot of photography and making a lot of money. But after JonBenet's death, according to this newspaper article, he moved way out east on Interstate 70. So here's a look at that, and here's a look at the place that he lived at after living in Englewood. Now, Randall had 3 brushes with the law, as far as I have been able to determine. The first one was in 1991, where he was charged with felony assault and misdemeanor, and he ultimately pled guilty to the misdemeanor charge, and the felony charge was dropped. Then he had an issue after JonBenet's death, where he was arrested for indecent exposure because he was found naked roaming the streets of that town way out there. And after that, he moved to Oregon, and he lived in Eugene for a while, and then he moved to Oak Ridge, and there's where he got into his most serious trouble. The children's photographer accused of accessing child pornography via the wireless internet network of an Oak Ridge restaurant appears to be the same man who photographed 6-year-old beauty queen JonBenet Ramsey in June of 1996 and sold a portfolio of the images shortly after her death. Police in Oregon arrested Randall D. Simmons, 66, on July 2nd, 2019 on 16 counts of encouraging child sex abuse. The incidents happened between August 2018 and June 2019. Working in conjunction with Springfield Police Department and other law enforcement agencies, Simmons was identified as regularly accessing images of child pornography on the public wireless network of a local restaurant. Police in Oak Ridge, Oregon, said in a statement at the time of his arrest. Simmons describes himself as a children's photographer. Now, that restaurant wasn't an Olive Garden or Red Lobster. It was this fast food restaurant, this AMW root beer, right on the main drag through Oak Ridge, Oregon. So Randall got himself more than 10 years in prison, and his earliest release is December 25th, 2030. Now here's a side-by-side look at Randall when he was young, around the time of JonBenet's murder, and what he looks like now, sitting in a jail cell in Oregon. Number 9. Joe Barnhill Jr., age 51. Many people know about Joe Barnhill Sr., the neighborly, older gentleman who lived across the street from the Ramseys, who took care of their dog. But they didn't know his oldest son lived nearby, about a half hour away. And were you aware that Joe Barnhill Jr. received 2 court-martials when he was in the military in 1964? And he was arrested for entering a Boulder residence and stealing $100 in coins in 1967. And in 1968, his 10-year-old daughter died of unusual circumstances. Number 8. Nathan Inoue, age 21, was at 816 10th Street in Boulder, living with the Steins, Glenn and Susan Stein, and he often drove their son, Doug, and Burke and JonBenet to school. So he was very familiar with the children. Number 7. Stephen Colby, age 49, lived at 738 14th Street in Boulder, which was just across the back alley from the Ramseys. And so he had a good view of the back area of the Ramseys' house. And his son Eben was over at the Ramseys' house on Christmas Day until he had to leave when the Ramseys left for the Whites' Christmas party. And so they definitely knew that the Ramseys were away that night. And here's a photograph, I believe, of Eben when he was older at the beach. Number 6. Mark Lenhart, age 35, who lived in Greeley. He is the son-in-law of the housekeeper, Linda Hoffman Pugh, and her second daughter married Mark. And on the weekend of Thanksgiving 1996, Mervyn, Tina, and Mark went over to the Ramseys' house and removed the Christmas decorations from the wine cellar. Number 5. Now, if you want somebody really strange, then you have John Chiselbrook, age 54. He lived in Boulder at some time because he has a son who graduated from one of the high schools in Boulder. But he's from Florida. But here's the story. Sandra, right there, Henderson, was employed at Access Graphics, and she was married to Bud, her husband. But they split up around the time that she embezzled some money from Access Graphics. And she was arrested for that. At least I think she was arrested for that. But she was required to return the money that she stole. And it's like somewhere near the amount of the $118,000 ransom. So that's why they think she might be involved. Now, the night that JonBenet was murdered, she was in a women's prison in Denver. Now, John Chiselbrook is her boyfriend at the time that JonBenet was murdered. And so he might have been the one that went there that night and committed this crime. Number 4. Glenn Ray Meyer, age 64, lived at 764 15th Street in Boulder, which was Joe and Betty Barnhill's house. He lived in their basement, and on December 23rd, he went over to the Ramsey's house uninvited to their Christmas party, and he had some kind of question or something for Joe Barnhill. He also was aware that JonBenet's Christmas bicycle was stored at the Barnhill's house. He knew that JonBenet's dog was over there, and the police were suspicious of him and his handwriting because he was asked to do a second handwriting sample for the police. Number 3. Fleet White Jr., age 47, lived at 403 Cleveland Place in Boulder, which is just a little more than a mile away from the Ramsey's house. And the Ramseys were at their house that night at the Christmas dinner. Now, something a lot of people don't realize is Fleet and Priscilla moved to Boulder in the summer of 1994. So John and Patsy were already in Boulder for several years before they met Fleet. And Fleet moved into a house 3 doors south of the Ramseys, and so they shared that back alleyway. He didn't move his family over to the Cleveland address for more than a year later. Number 2. Clifton Gaston, age 51, from Monterey, California. And there's a picture of his house in the top right, and he was staying the night at Fleet and Priscilla's house for the Christmas holidays. And he was a military veteran of Vietnam, and he was in the Special Forces, and he was a helicopter pilot, and he could have got over to JonBenet's house that night. Number 1. Jesse McReynolds, age 37, who lived in Netherland, Colorado, when JonBenet was murdered. So I couldn't find a photograph of his house because he lives up in the mountains west of Boulder. And then below is the map, and you can see Netherland and to the east, Boulder, and it's probably about an hour drive. Jesse is the oldest son of Bill and Janet McReynolds, and Bill McReynolds played Santa Claus at the mall, and Patsy invited him to her house at least 2 years, maybe 3 years, to play Santa Claus at their Christmas party. And the latest party was December 23rd, 2 days before JonBenet was murdered. And both Bill and Janet attended that party. Now, Jesse knew about John Ramsey and where he lived, and he had a big-time drug problem. Now, according to this newspaper article, a few years after JonBenet's death, Jesse Reynolds and his wife were arrested for possession with intent to distribute cocaine and heroin. Well, this ends this episode of Unsolved, and if that unknown male DNA comes back to one of these suspects, then I might believe it. Otherwise, I'm not gonna believe who they say killed JonBenet Ramsey.